Hi, I'm Eric from SceneStealers.com, and today we have Rian Johnson, who is the writer-director of The Brothers Bloom, as well as a great movie you may remember from a couple years ago called Brick. And we're really happy to have you here today. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me, Eric.
So first off, The Brothers Bloom is it's a con man movie. We've got Adrian Brody and Mark Ruffalo as these expert con men, and then Rachel Weisz is kind of in there. And what this movie did for me was it developed a love story, which is something I've never really seen in a con man movie before. And I wanted to know, how hard was it for you to develop that in a movie where the audience is constantly expecting a con?
That was exactly the tricky thing, and that was kind of, in a way, that was kind of what I started with when I was writing it. It was because I love con man movies, and I thought it'd be an interesting challenge to try and make a film where it's a con man movie, but at the ending, instead of a plot twist, it was more of an emotional payoff. Those were kind of the marching orders I tried to set for myself. And you nailed exactly what the difficult thing is. It's audience That's also what the fun part about it was, for me, trying to figure out how to do it. But audiences come into con man movies kind of with their dukes up, you know, with some emotional distance, because the big question is who's going to screw who over at the end, you know. And you know, there are exceptions. I mean, Paper Moon was kind of a movie that, for me, first got me thinking about doing a con man story with a little more of a relationship aspect to it, and a little more of a fairy tale type feel to it. But yeah, that was kind of the big challenge. And the way I kind of approached it was to I figured, okay, well, if that's the problem we're up against, that the audience is thinking this is all just a big con, so none of it really matters, let's make that the main character's issue. So that's where Bloom is at the beginning of it, is Adrian Brody's character. He's keeping everybody at arm's distance, same way the audience is, because he thinks all this is phony, and this is all just leading to a sting where someone's going to get hurt, you know. So, I figure if you make that his issue, then you can explicitly work through that during the course of the movie.
This is the first time in this type of a movie that I've seen the con man, Mark Ruffalo's character, approach the con as a work of art.
Right.
He wants it to have, you know, he's got literary references, and, you know, dramatic, you know, payoffs, and poetic license. You know, how important was that to the story?
Oh yeah, that was like one of the central things for it. It was all about storytelling, because for me, that's what the whole thing is kind of about. So that's what was kind of on my mind, and the question that I was trying to work through for myself when I was in the process of writing this and making this thing is you know, the point where storytelling intersects with our lives, and not just for, you know, people who tell stories for a living. I think for everybody, you know, because to a certain extent, what we do as human beings, we take in all this raw information from the outside world, and our perspective on the world, in a way, ourselves, the thing that we call ourself, is built up by how we process that information and tell it back to ourselves, how we line it up, how we, you know, how we turn it into a story, basically. There's 1,000 different ways you can go through the exact same day, and two people could tell a very different story in terms of how they, you know, how they feel about what happened during that day. So, and in that way, it was, I don't know, that's kind of Stephen's approach, is to, in a very bombastic, explicit way, to actually, and so Bloom is kind of me, where I'm figuring out, okay, there's that way to go about it, and then there's Penelope, Rachel Weisz, who is much more just about experience. She doesn't plan anything. She doesn't like write these grand things. She's she's kind of exactly what Bloom is missing, which is seeing what's in front of her and just experiencing it for what it is.
I should directly address the camera and say that we're talking about all this really heavy stuff. This is a very funny movie.
Oh yeah, it sounds like it.
and one of the things I really liked in Brick, you kind of, I think you have a really good knack for writing dialogue. And in Brick, you've got kind of, they have their own noir high school lingo, if you will. In this movie, the dialogue's great, but what impressed me about one specific character, played by Rinko Kikuchi, the Bang Bang character, is that she didn't speak hardly at all. And I got a lot of maybe like a Harpo Marx kind of thing out of that. Is that what you were going for?
You're 2 for 2, man. That's it. That's what it was. And it's also, I mean, because I really enjoy writing dialogue, to the point where it's something I'm trying to work on doing a lot less of, because, you know, when you're writing something and it's just you and a page of words, the temptation is to put everything into words. And so in a way for me, that character was a way to force myself, even during the writing process, to think about the visual elements of the scene, to think, okay, there's one character who I have to see this scene through her eyes, and she has no words at all. There can be no dialogue. So there was that, and then there's also my friend Joe, who acted in Brick. He's really into clowns. He's really into clowning. He's friends with this Russian troupe of clowns.
You're talking about Joseph Gordon-Levitt?
Yeah, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, yeah. And in Russia, clowning is really admired as an art form, actually. It's very different than the pies in the face that we get here. It's kind of weird. When you see it, it almost feels like existential clowning. It's very, but it's all physical, nonverbal performance. And so he had gotten me into this one Russian clown troupe that I had gone to see a bunch of times. And I just thought it would be amazing to see if we can build a character without any words at all, who is as much a character, as strong a character as anybody else in the piece, you know. So cool. That was, and Rinko, luckily, she didn't look at and say, where the hell are all my lines? She was really actually excited about the idea.
Were you going for an old world feel? Because it's kind of hard to place the time. I mean, we can tell, there's clues enough that we know this is modern day, but it sure doesn't look like a modern movie.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, visually, what I was looking at was, I was looking at Bertolucci, actually. I was looking at The Conformist. I would go home every night and watch The Conformist, and the way that he has very, you can feel the space that you're in every shot, and the way the camera moves, it's always very deliberate and done in such a way where it reveals the space to be very three-dimensional, and where you can really, these wide compositions where you can take in these, you know, like you said, it's about the art direction, it's about the costumes, and that heightened level of style, it's kind of to the same end that the heightened style, different type of heightened style was in Brick, which is to, you know, elevate this above the ordinary world to a specific purpose. With Brick, it was to let you know it's not a real high school world, so you can buy some of the things that are going on. With this, with Bloom, it's so that you buy that this entire world is written by Steven, that you're kind of completely under his control the whole time, which is the way that Bloom feels. And I felt like a heightened stylistic reality could kind of maybe help that with the audience. You know?
And then even at the beginning of the movie, you've got Ricky Jay narrates this great 10-minute piece about the brothers' history, and there's a scene where a cat is
one-legged cat.
Yeah, one-legged cat, and he's pushing himself along, and right away it's pretty obvious we're not in the real world.
No, absolutely, and especially the open sequence. I mean, it starts. There's a progression with the movie, which is really, it's very deliberate, but it's also something that I can. I think at first blush it's caught a lot of people off guard, and people tend to kind of be with the movie for the first part of it, and then the ending is the place where it either works for people or it doesn't.
It gets a little darker.
It does, yeah, because it starts with this very arch form of storytelling, kind of a storybook style, you know, little thing with a little zinger at the end, exactly what you'd expect. And we start with this kind of suffocating style that's you know, all of a sudden it feels like you're in a Kusturica movie or a Fellini film, where there's just, they're at the beginning, they're in this wacky club, and there's dwarves dancing on the bar, and there's, you know, all kinds of wacky stuff going on. There's camels drinking out of flasks of you know, whiskey, and you feel Bloom just being kind of locked in concrete of all this craziness, which is all amazing, cool stuff. But it's if that's your world, it's kind of like you're sick of going to your office job, you know. Yeah. So it starts with this very extreme style, and then by the end of it, it ends in a very different place, I think. Which it's interesting to see how people react to that, and I wonder if, as the movie lives a little bit more, if people revisit it, if it'll. How the ending will play as opposed to taking it in the first time. I don't know. Right. Yeah.
So Brick and Brothers Bloom, both very stylized movies, but in different ways. Yeah. I heard that you're doing a sci-fi movie next.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about it? Or?
Yeah, I'm working on the second draft right now. Very different than both Brick and Bloom.
And you're writing this one and directing it as
well? Yeah. Directing, knock on wood. If we can fool him again. Right. Directing it. It's no, it's closer to Brick, but it's still very different. It's really violent, actually. It's a kind of a set in the near future, and it's it's sci-fi, but it's not like big, like James Cameron's sci-fi. Although I guess the first Terminator might be the closest thing that I put it to in terms of the scope of it. You know?
A big scope, but not always seen.
Yeah, in a way. And it's set in the near future. It's set like 30 years from now. So,
what's it called?
Looper, like a loop. It's because it has time travel in it. Which,
oh, nice.
Yeah.
From con artists to time travel. You're not making it easy on yourself.
It's nice until you have to write it, man. Oh my God. Yeah, it's my head hurts all the time a little bit.
Yeah.
But it's not as tricky as like like Primer or something like that. It's not something where it taxes your brain. Like I said, it's more like the first Terminator, where time travel is part of the setup, and then it kind of does its thing.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. I can't wait to see it, man.
Yeah.
It was great talking to you.
Yeah, pleasure talking to you. Absolutely. Goodbye.